Football fans from Tallahassee to Timbuktu have been putting their chips on the fish. The Miami Dolphins, that is, to win it all in 1984. And so far, the Floridians have given them a lot of reasons to be confident. First, there's that perfect 4-0 record. Then there's the hottest arm in the NFL, quarterback Dan Marino, whose unreal passing totals would make anyone smile. And finally, there's a tough defense and additional offensive power with young receivers like Mark Duper and Mark Clayton, number 83. All this talent makes Miami a favorite every time they take the field. That's what worries St. Louis Cardinals coach Jim Hanifin, who has his team at 2-2. The Birds are usually slow seasonal starters, but a win today over a quality team like the Dolphins would remedy that. Casting the largest shadow of them all is St. Louis quarterback Neil Lomax, who, like Marino, is one of the best young passers in the league. If both are clicking, a plethora of points is likely, but history is going against the Cardinals. They've never beaten Miami in 4 previous outings. From Busch Stadium in St. Louis, the Big Red Line ushers in what will be an offensive feast. The Dolphins and Cardinals on the NFL Game of the Week. If the Dolphins have an Achilles heel, it might be their running game, which has been weakened by injury. Some replacements have been obtained, but the ground attack still isn't quite at the level of Miami's passing offense. St. Louis stopped the Dolphin infantry and the rest of their offense for a good part of the first quarter, as Dan Marino probed and tested for the best way to move on the Cardinal defense. St. Louis did not fare much better as they were held scoreless in the initial frame. Their only play of any significant yardage was this completion from Neil Lomax to reserve tight end Greg LaFleur, number 89. Both teams showed early defensive effectiveness, but this was basically a mirage. There would be nearly 1,000 yards of total offense by the time this one would end. And finally, the Dolphins started producing some of those numbers on the arm of Dan Marino. Number 87, tight end Dan Johnson, set up a field goal on this long reception. And then wide receiver Mark Super Duper, number 85, made the first of his many impressive catches to pave the way for another score. Twice in the first period, kicker Uwe van Schamen's aim was true as he drilled field goals of 27 and 26 yards. Uwe would suffer a few blocked kicks later in the contest, but those had little bearing on the outcome. For now, his leg gave Miami a 6-0 lead as period 1 concluded. This early burst of Dolphin field goals was a trend that would not last. Miami soon got the ball back and watched as their brightest star continued to add to his already impressive passing totals. Marino entered the game with over 1,000 yards through the air, a completion rate of 65%, and a dozen touchdowns. This long one to wide receiver Mark Clayton would simply be more of the same. The pass was good for 42 yards, and then Marino notched the first of many touchdowns with a connection to tight end Joe Rose, number 80. A bit of the bloom came off Rose's reception when the extra point was blocked. Yet still, the Dolphins had a tidy early lead. But to expect anyone to shut out St. Louis these days is asking. The Cardinals are loaded with offensive weapons, and finally they began producing on St. Louis's first drive of the second period. Tight end Doug Marsh got things rolling, and then Neil Lomax turned to St. Louis's now not-so-secret weapon, number 30, running back Stump Mitchell. Mitchell was playing for the injured O.J. Anderson, and absolutely no drop-off was evident. Stump had 2 touchdowns the previous week against the Saints and kept that pace going against Miami. Stump accounted for 44 yards on the drive, then capped off his one-man show with the Cardinals' first score of the day. Mitchell entered the afternoon averaging over 9 yards per rushing attempt, and such totals were indicative of his performance in the game. The St. Louis super sub now had the birds on the board, but the Dolphins weren't going to stand by idly as the Cardinals started to climb back into the game. Marino and Duper roared right back with 2 long completions, and Miami was threatening again. After Duper's daily double, Marino spotted Mark Clayton for a completion that put the Dolphins at the Cardinals' doorstep. Pete Johnson, the king-size back recently acquired from the San Diego Chargers, then blasted in from the 2, and Miami upped its lead. It was the second touchdown in as many games for football's largest short yardage specialist, and it gave the Dolphins a 12-point advantage. If the Cardinals were to come back, the St. Louis offensive line would have to keep the killer bees of the Miami defense out of Lomax's hair. Right tackle Tootie Robbins, number 63, won this particular battle with All-Pro defensive end Doug Betters, giving Lomax time to set up. While Robbins and Betters danced the minuet, Lomax spotted and hit number 83, Pat Tilley, over the middle for an important completion. Tilley's gutsy grab was then followed by a pretty catch from fullback Earl Farrell, number 31. When Farrell wasn't making horizontal pass catches, he was clearing the way for Stump Mitchell, who continued to pile up big numbers. In the first half alone, the Stumper rushed for 75 yards. Finally, Lomax hit Doug Marsh on a crossing pattern, and the Cardinal tight end chugged it in for St. Louis's second touchdown. Only about a minute remained in the half as Marsh scored to make it 19-14, and the Cardinals looked like they had the momentum. But the celebration would be a short one as Miami answered back. All day, St. Louis would get tantalizingly close, only to see Marino and company pull away each time. The Cardinals Cardinals now appeared to be in good shape as the first half drew to a close. They had scored on the Lomax to Marsh touchdown with just over a minute remaining in the second period to cut Miami's lead to 19-14. And their defense was intent on preventing the Dolphins from producing a last-minute score. Number 59, Thomas Howard, dropped Tony Nathan for a loss, setting up a 3rd and 14 for Miami with 50 seconds left. But Dan Marino calmly drilled a sideline strike to Mark Duper. And then 2 plays later, the brilliant second-year quarterback went over 300 yards in the first half with a 29-yard touchdown to Mark Clayton. Both Clayton and Duper caught passes for over 100 yards in the first 30 minutes, as Marino's 318 passing yards were mostly responsible for Miami's 26-14 halftime advantage. The third quarter saw the Dolphins' offense continue to move the ball well against St. Louis. On Miami's first possession of the second half, Tony Nathan swept around the right side for 13 yards as the Dolphins went to their running game. Miami's first 4 plays in the third quarter were runs, although this reverse to Mark Clayton was diagrammed in the playbook as a flanker pass. Following the improvisation, the second-year wide receiver, an 8th-round draft choice a year ago, went back to what he does best, catching passes thrown by fellow sophomore Marino. Clayton's leaping grab set up a field goal attempt by Uwe von Schamann, who had kicked 2 in the first half. This time, von Schamann's 3-point try was blocked, and the Cardinals, very much in danger of losing control of the game at this point, midway through the third period, stayed close enough to mount a comeback against a Dolphins defense that was primed to hit. This defense was pumped. They couldn't wait for the Cardinals to break the huddle, so they did the next best thing. They hit themselves. Now it was time to go after the people wearing the red uniforms, and the Dolphins relished the opportunity. Stump Mitchell, who had been effective as both a runner and a receiver for St. Louis in the first half, found little room to maneuver in the second. But the rapidly improving Lomax found the openings, and the Cardinals' passing game matched the effectiveness of Miami's. While Marino threw to speedsters Duper and Clayton, Lomax went to Pat Tilley, the outstanding veteran possession receiver, and to his tight end Doug Marsh. The 25-yard pass to Marsh moved St. Louis deep into Dolphins territory as the third quarter approached its close. The Cardinals still trailed 26-14, and they needed to take advantage of this opportunity. They did so with a touchdown as fullback Earl Farrell, number 31, battered his way through the Miami defense for the final 11 yards. Farrell's score made it Miami 26, St. Louis 21. And for the second time in the game, the Cardinals had used a 10-play, 80-yard drive to cut the Dolphins' lead to 5. The touchdown was the result of strong blocking by the left side of St. Louis's offensive line. Farrell was never really challenged by the defense until he reached the goal line. And at that point, it was too late to stop the 215-pound fullback. The Cardinals kept coming back. What they needed to do was to stop Marino and Miami. They would not be able to do it. Miami's offensive line has been outstanding through the early part of the 1984 season. Coming into the game with the Cardinals, Marino had been sacked only once, and perhaps that, more than anything, had contributed to the success of the passing game. Marino ended the third quarter with a bullet over the middle to Duper. Then began the fourth period with a strike to Clayton. It was only a matter of time before the Dolphins scored again, and they did so on the seventh play of the drive. From the St. Louis 23-yard line, Marino dumped the ball off to Tony Nathan, who had nothing but daylight ahead of him as he streaked toward the end zone. The Dolphins had quickly upped their lead back to 12, 33-21, on Marino's third touchdown pass of the game and 15th of the young season. The 23-yard toss to Nathan was part of a day that saw Marino establish a new Miami record with 429 yards passing. Nearly 12 minutes remained in the game. The Cardinals were by no means out of it, but they no longer had time for sustained drives that took 7 or 8 minutes off the clock. They had to score quickly, and they got off to a good start on this Lomax to Tilley completion. But the good turned bad as Tilley fumbled and the Dolphins recovered. Cornerback Don McNeil scooped up the loose ball, and Miami was in excellent position to put this contest out of reach. For a change, Marino could not get the Dolphins into the end zone, so Miami settled for Uwe von Schauman's third field goal of the game, this one from 27 yards. And with 7.5 minutes left in the final period, the Dolphins led 36-21. The Cardinals needed 3 scores to win, and that was not likely to happen. But Stump Mitchell, all 5'9", 190 pounds of him, gave it his best shot. Mitchell would finish the contest with 109 yards rushing on 20 carries, and his second touchdown of the game, a 4-yard stroll around the left side, made it a 36-28 game. Mitchell had turned in another fine performance, subbing for an injured O.J. Anderson. But there was little number 30 could do at this point. Only 3 minutes and 36 seconds remained. The Cardinals trailed Miami by the score of 36-28, and the Dolphins had the ball. The final plays of this game were purely for the statistics. On a day that produced nearly 1,000 yards of total offense, including 429 passing yards by Dan Marino and 308 by Neil Lomax, the Miami Dolphins remain one of only 2 undefeated teams in the NFL. The Cardinals scored enough to win against most teams, but in 1984, the Miami Dolphins may be a cut above just about anyone else.